Mosques are places for communal prayer. Muslims pray 5 times daily and on Fridays as a community. For daily prayer, one can simply unroll a prayer rug and pray anywhere. But community prayer takes place on Fridays in a congregational mosque. This is the mosque in Urbana, Illinois, down the street from my house, where my neighbors meet for worship and to take classes in religious education. In its distinctive red and white arched entrance, it isn't following the typical architectural style of Illinois. Instead, it is quoting a much older mosque in southern Spain that was also distinctive for its colorful arcades. The Great Mosque of Córdoba, built between the 8th and 10th centuries in southern Spain, consisted of 2 parts, an open courtyard and a roofed prayer hall. The prayer hall is oriented to Mecca, which is the direction toward which Muslims pray. Here, you can see the red and white arches that inspired the Illinois mosque. The prayer hall in the Córdoba Mosque is often described as a forest of columns. Constructing the hall with multiple columns in this way meant that it could be easily expanded, and many mosques were enlarged as their communities grew. The columns held up the arches that supported the roof, but they served another purpose as well. Standing equidistant from each other, each column was functionally the same as the next, mirroring the equality of the assembled Muslims in the eyes of God and the egalitarianism of Islam in general. Curiously, the columns and column capitals in the Córdoba Mosque were reused from old Roman villas. Spain had been an important Roman colony. Older building materials were commonly reused in Muslim buildings. The reuse, including in a place as important as the mosque, shows the tolerance that we see in early Islam toward other cultural traditions and religions. It also reveals the kind of practical decisions made by builders. Good material was valued and reused, whatever its source, even if it didn't quite match. Inside, the wall closest to Mecca, and thus the wall toward which the faithful face when they pray, is marked by a niche called a mihrab. Usually the mihrab is the most highly ornamented element in a mosque. In most congregational mosques, there is a stepped pulpit called a minbar next to the mihrab. This is an early element in the mosque, dating to the time of the Prophet Muhammad himself in the 7th century, who used a minbar with 2 steps to preach to the assembled congregation. We are looking here at the 14th century Sultan Hassan complex in Cairo, a building where a mosque was combined with a madrasa, that is, a residential college. Next to the mihrab niche, made of different colored marble panels, there is a large, handsome stone minbar. The minbar has a door at its foot and steps that lead up to a domed platform. Used for the weekly sermon, the minbar was an acoustical device that raised the speaker above the heads of the assembled congregation. Remember, this was an age before electronic amplification. The minaret tower also had an acoustical function to call the faithful to prayer from the surrounding community. While the minaret may certainly amplify the call, it seems to have been developed in the 8th century more as a visual sign of the power of and allegiance to the ruling dynasty. For this reason, they look very different in different parts of the Muslim world. In Iraq, the 9th century mosque of Al-Mutawakkil had a spiral minaret. In Turkey, Ottoman minarets are usually long and slender. In Córdoba, the minaret was rectangular. In time, the tall minaret became a visual sign for the mosque below, a reminder of the presence of Islam in each community. I said that the Mosque of Córdoba expanded, and it did expand multiple times. In the first expansion, the walls were torn down to allow the growth of the prayer hall beyond its original footprint. In the last phase, by which point Córdoba had been conquered by the Christian kingdom to the north, a church rose out of the middle of the prayer hall. Ironically, this Christian addition, which eviscerated the center of the old mosque, gave it a new role as the frame for the Christian church. And this meant that the Córdoba mosque survived, mostly, whereas other mosques were destroyed or altogether replaced by churches. This type of mosque, with lots of evenly spaced columns, allowing for easily expandable, flexible interior space, was common in the Mediterranean. But elsewhere, other types of mosques developed. In Djenné, Mali, this great mosque was built in the 13th century and rebuilt many times thereafter. Like the Córdoba Mosque, it had a flexible, egalitarian interior space comprised of rows of large piers. However, it was built of very different materials. Instead of stone and mosaic, the Genet Mosque was built of mud brick that then received a smooth outer coating. The Mali Mosque had a flat roof, and the Cordoba Mosque had a pitched or gabled roof. But in the land known today as Turkey, the Ottoman dynasty favored domes. At the 16th century Süleymaniye Mosque in Istanbul, for example, we see a courtyard and a domed prayer hall. The prayer hall domes are of various scales, piled together to create a vast, soaring, airy interior. Inside, an immense dome stands on 4 huge piers. This concentration of support in the 4 corners, like the legs of a table, means there is no need for additional columns to clutter up the space below, and there's no need for thick walls. For additional support, half domes are added at either end, and they push inward against the central dome, keeping it aloft. They also elongate the interior space of the prayer hall lengthwise, doubling it, so that the approach from the entrance of the prayer hall to the mihrab is longer and more dramatic, heightening the sense of anticipation. Because it's the piers, not the walls, that carry the weight, the walls are thin and pierced with rows of windows. The result, an interior that is flooded with light. In the calligraphy art spot, we see how figural imagery is avoided in explicitly religious settings. Here at the Süleymaniye Mosque, instead of scenes from the life of the Prophet or parables from the Quran, we see monumental calligraphy. Over the mihrab, for example, are large discs with the words Allah and Muhammad. On the exterior, the mosque has 4 needle-like minarets. Clearly, only one is needed for the call to prayer. Yet together they serve as visual signs, marking the presence of the mosque and serving as visual beacons that can be seen from a distance. In addition to the large congregational mosques, there are also smaller neighborhood mosques and also mosque spaces within other buildings like madrasas, which are residential colleges. For example, the small prayer hall in the Bou Inania Madrasa in Fez, Morocco. This one also had a fairly large prayer hall that served the students as well as the surrounding community. It was reached by a separate door towards the back so that outsiders could enter the prayer hall without disturbing the students and professors in their studies. In most mosques, to keep the sexes separate, women line up and pray in the back of the prayer hall. But in some mosques, there are reserved spaces for the exclusive use of women, and in rare cases, entire mosques built just for women. For example, in Indonesia, which has the largest number of Muslims of any modern nation, this little mosque in the city of Yogyakarta serves the women of the royal palace. It is unlike any of the earlier mosque types we have seen because it follows local Buddhist models, with a high pyramidal roof of wooden beams over an open prayer hall below. There are many different kinds of mosques, large and small, their style and ornament varying according to where and when they were built, from the beginning of Islam to the present day, and from Illinois to Indonesia. More information on mosque architecture is available in the book Islamic Arts, as well as other books in the Art Spots bibliography on the Muslim Journeys website.
Islamic Art Spots are a presentation of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Bridging Culture's bookshelf, Muslim Journeys, is a presentation of the National Endowment for the Humanities in cooperation with the American Library Association. Support for this program was provided by a grant from Carnegie Corporation of New York, with additional support for art and media components from the Doris Duke Foundation for Islamic Art. To further explore the Islamic Art Spots and the Bridging Culture's bookshelf, Muslim Journeys, visit the Muslim Journeys website